he wouldn't have felt like that. He wouldn't have felt licensed to get involved like that if it hadn't been for his captain cheering off 10 seconds, not even 10 seconds before. But needless anyway, what a pathetic penalty, and then for it to be punished in the way it was kind of justice.
Yeah, I'm glad that people have been consistent in the fan reviews here, because a year ago when Partington did that to a Castleford player, there was people whose fan reviews were saying that he deserved the sort of tombstone that Jesse Senilafeo dropped on him later on in that game for rubbing a player's head. And for people who don't remember, in the playoffs last year as well, Oliver Gildart was penalised, weren't he, for tapping Chris Wellham, was it? Was it on the back or on the shoulder or on the head? I can't remember, but it certainly wasn't. It was as he was walking back past him after an error was made. It wasn't. He didn't run 30 or 40 metres to go through all of his teammates to go and find a player who wasn't involved in the play like Griffin did. Anyone, including his head coach, who was defending that from Josh Griffin, is just wrong, basically.
Okie doke. So that's the main incident. I think obviously one of the major talking points is the performance of Jackson Hastings at a position we didn't really know he had.
Well, let's wrap up the sort of decisions in the first half that Hull FC then thought everything else was against them because one decision was given correctly and two decisions were given that they don't like. So definitely Liggy Sal didn't knock on. The referees missed that was a ball steal. Absolutely correct that should have been a penalty to Hull FC rather than a knock on in Wigan's favour. And later on in the half there was the one where it was hard to see really from the replays, but I feel like Hull were a bit harshly done to when Connor kicked the ball out of Bevan French's hands, but I think Bevan French didn't have full control of it at that point, so I'm not sure where the rules stand on that one. I think that was a little bit harsh, but because the narrative had built up in Hull FC fans' minds that the referee was against them, then they think everything else is wrong, especially players not getting involved from marker when they're offside because they shouted offside. He did that for both teams, by the way. Watch the game back. Then they're thinking those things are working against their side, aren't they? Because they've got it in their head that Kendall's determined because of one Liggy Sal knock on, because that's the only decision he definitely got wrong in this match, in my opinion.
I think he was a good.
Can't hear you again, Tim.
I think it was. You can hear me now. Hello.
Yeah.
I think it was a fairly good performance, to be honest. From Kendall, I think he was quite fair. I think there was that error in there, but I don't think that's necessarily a skill error. I think that's just a flow and speed of the game. So I think he's done fairly all right there overall, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm not so sure he should have got the grand final personally, but I think that's because he's made a few mistakes in other games as well this season. I don't think he's been as good this year as he was last year.
Okay, so after the major talking point, the major incident, what we did have is Gildart's pass, which should be put up in an art gallery.
I think Harry Smith's pass to Gildart was particularly good as well.
It was good, but it wasn't that. The Gildart one was just sublime. It was just, he just felt like he had it on a wire as well, and it was just, he was going straight into Burgess. He knew exactly where he was to the millimetre and just put it there within. Yeah, it's just absolute perfect, and that needs to be shown on every highlight reel going. It was just perfect.
And then the next try as well, that involved some of the same cast of characters, I thought was an even better try. The Harry Smith try, the short side play instigated by Jackson Hastings was really good. And the involvement from Burgess was good. He just kicked it before it hit the ground, which was a close one. But Harry Smith took it and went in to score, and I think he made up for a couple of errors on a few bad kicks before that in the game. He'd kicked out on the full, hadn't he, on one occasion, and there was one kick that didn't sort of put any pressure on the whole defence. But at that point, I think those 5 minutes where that pass in the build up to Burgess's try and then that try switched his whole mindset around in that game and made him believe he could play at that level, I think, almost, and then he was good throughout the rest of the game. Yeah,
that's fair enough. I mean, and the Hardacre try as well was another fantastic try, really, from that Wigan stable.
Well, that try was just... that try really did change the game, because that was... Not change the game, but seal the game, I think, for Wigan, because that was just after half-time. Hull needed to come back from the disappointment of basically putting themselves on the back foot and then having one or two decisions that went against them, which saw them go from being 2-0 up to being 13-2 down. They needed to start strongly in the second half, but Wigan were the ones that started strongly, weren't they? And I just watched that try and thought, God, there was 3 Hull players there that were terrified of Bevan French. Didn't even think that Zach Hardacre was a threat, but Hardacre ran a really good line, and nice handoff on Cater, but it was pretty much just a walk-in.
Yeah, I mean, it was good, and it was showing the skill of having a fullback in the centre as much as anything from the line he was able to run.
Yeah, because he could see you see more, don't you, as a fullback, maybe sometimes in the centre, and he could see what was developing there. He could see the overchase on French, basically.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I really enjoyed watching this game. It was a good contest. The scoreline slightly higher from the end of it than perhaps it was certainly in the first half. It was very close, and you did feel like Hull FC might have a bit more than they did on the score sheet, but all credit to Wigan. What a great performance.
Well, fundamentally, when the game was pretty much won anyway, Wigan put in a couple of really good defensive efforts. I mean, the Bevan French where he chased back on Mark Snyde and knocked the ball out, that was a fantastic tackle, a fantastic moment, for Bevan French to show his defensive qualities as well as what we've seen most this year was his attacking excitement. Bevan French bust through one of the few actual attacking plays that Hull FC were able to put on in this game on the Wigan defence. And then there was the try that was awarded on the field by the referee who hated the side. That actually was not a try because it was a knock-on in the build-up, but the video referee ruled it out. But I think Burgess, some quite good quick reactions from Burgess to make sure he got his hand in there to touch the ball before Nulongo could tap it back after tapping it forward, sort of thing. So Wigan's defence clung on to a no tries conceded, didn't they, with efforts in that last 10 minutes or so, even though the game was effectively won.
Yeah.
So Hastings, you wanted to talk about Hastings?
I did, because I just think he had a really good performance at Hooker. I think he just showed us another string to his bow, that he's got that extra versatility, so he's worth having in his squad for the cover factor as much as anything else.
I just think his desire to win matches of Rugby League is one of those. His competitiveness, I think. Most players who play our sport at the top level are very competitive, but I think some players have a different edge to their competitiveness, and I think he's one of those players. And I actually think, he showed his leadership qualities for Wigan as well, stepping into that position, not wanting to run the game, as in like running all the time himself and trying to do it all on his own. Jackson Hastings last year did that. Jackson Hastings this year will let young Harry Smith try and run the play. He will give the ball to Sean O'Loughlin or to Liam Farrell to make something happen. I think he's progressed in that way. That's one thing he's progressed, and this performance I think showed that.
Yeah, and I think it is part of the evolution of him, that it shows that he can bring other players in, and I think that's where he'll evolve into as a player, is someone who's able to orchestrate more rather than doing all the running himself. But at the same time, to be able to play two positions to that brilliant level is It's just not fair, is it?
Yeah, and I do think what Wigan got right in this game was everything they did was, apart from Singleton's shoulder charge at the end, where he just seemed to mistime it, and in terms of mistimed his defensive effort, and then inexplicably thought the way to get around that was to put his shoulder in. But luckily there was no injury there, and it wasn't a high contact and that sort of thing, so that's lucky. But that was the only time I think in the whole game that I thought Wigan lost their rag. Well, Willie Isa and Manu Mao before, or was it Liggy Sow and Willie Isa before half time? There was a bit of that there, but he'd waited until the whistle had gone before he lost his shit, rather than doing it like in a way that might damage his team's performance, sort of thing. So I think Wigan were far more controlled, whereas that big flashpoint moment in particular showed that Hull FC weren't controlled in as much as Wigan were. And then Hull FC from that did go on to concede a lot of penalties, and it was, how many ball steals did they try and throw in the last 20 minutes?
Yeah, it was a sort of desperation thing in a way, but just needed to focus on getting a quick play of the ball.
Whereas Wigan showed the right sort of intensity in this game, I think, which saw them through in a comfortable win in the end after a good start from Hull. Shall we move on to the second game where we...
I was going to say, speaking of comfortable wins, let's talk about the second game.
And like the opposite version of controlling your intensity. Do you want to take us through the scores and stats?
Yeah, it finished St Helens 48, the Catalan Dragons 2, having been 14-2 at half-time. Liam Moore was your referee for this one, and it was not a great time for the Catalans, who put up a 5.6 metres per carry, 758 total metres, so under 1,000 metres for them, always a danger sign, and 88 team tackle success rate performance. St Helens won on all the key stats other than making one extra error, but you can afford to when you've got that many points in the bag. But 8 more breaks and 447 more metres at 1.7 metres per carry, better average gain, more than made up for that little error chucked in there. In terms of the St Helens side, Tommy Makinson making 2 try assists, 7 tackle busts, running for 172 metres, 3 clean breaks. Kevin Nagama and Kevin Nagama's hair making 3 tries, 146 metres. Zeb Tyre, 1 try assist, 121 metres. Lachlan Coote, 2 tries, 7 tackle busts and 2 clean breaks. And the only one to travel our stat lines on the losing Catalan Dragons side was Ulrich da Costa, who made 44 tackles. Once again, we had some fan views on this.
Yeah, Pop the Viking said, Saints far too good for Catalan. Hopefully the grand final will be a cracker. Oh, and Hull gets to host a big derby game for once. That was a good joke. That was doing the rounds, wasn't it? It wound people up, which was, I think, its aim.
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, yeah, well, is it a derby, really?
Well, the Earl of Derby, whose estate sits in between the two towns of St Helens and Wigan, has put his name to the match. So it's a derby.
I knew word on word what you were going to say, and I knew exactly what you were almost going to say precisely there, but there we go.
Yeah.
Carlston, who actually lost the battle to be first fan view this time, so must try better. Catalan with a bad discipline again, and Saints with a really good attack.
St David said, wow, Saints well and truly back to their best. Solid in the middle, but playing on the edges from the off. Same approach next week, please, Mr. Wolf. As for Catalan, they didn't miss McAlorum, with several other headhunters stepping up to fill his grub quota. What a shower. Ref was very good and should get the grand final gig, so it'll be Kendall, obviously. Onwards to Hull, bring on the pies.
St David with some prophetic qualities yet again. And at Mike Webb 58 said, bizarrely and unnaturally felt sorry for Leeds watching this.